Okay, listeners, today we're joined by Euan Sinclair, a quantitative trader and author who's shaped the modern trading concepts with a PhD in theoretical physics, over 16 years of trading experience. His books have become like standard references for professional traders everywhere, and his latest work aims to bring these concepts to retail investors. So we're going to talk all about that, the writing process, and I'm so excited to dive in. So all of these expert authors listening today, get ready for another episode of Authors on Mission podcast. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and creative content officer at Authors on Mission. Let's get started. Welcome, Euan. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's great to have an opportunity to talk about myself for an hour.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. It's like sometimes my job is I kind of sit back and I let people just, praise themselves for a while. No, I'm kidding about that, of course. It's all about having a discussion and really talking about the writing world in particular, but also about how books and, written words can really just bring your theories and concepts to a huge range of audience members and so many different topics we can, touch upon here. I think the first question we're going to have to talk about is a little bit about your background, because a lot of our listeners, they might not be very familiar with everything. So, a little bit of research I did to find out about you before. We know that you were in the realm of theoretical physics, and then you eventually went to quantitative trading. Can you just let our listeners, especially those who might not be familiar with any industry, or how did you start? How did you move on to the next thing? Where are you now?
Okay, well, I grew up in New Zealand, did my undergrad there. Then I went to England to do a PhD. I was working with someone who's always on the shortlist for Nobel Prizes, and I met a bunch of Nobel Prize winners, and that was at the point where I realized I wasn't good enough. I could have got a job. It wasn't like I was unemployable. But academia is very much a winner-take-all type thing. You're either a superstar or you're teaching physics 101 to pre-med for the next 40 years. And I didn't want to do that. It's a very tough job. And if I wasn't going to really make it, I didn't want to do it. At that point, I was looking around for something else to do. And I was in England. England doesn't have a huge history of stock trading the same way the US does. Historically, it just hasn't. There's been very high transaction taxes on stocks, and it just wouldn't have worked. But at the time, it was sort of a fashion for trading firms to hire physics PhDs because they kind of wanted people who could do math. And so I just kind of fell into it, really. It was kind of luck, I think.
Yeah, okay. And I think beyond luck, though, I mean, there's a certain element to you need to be proud of yourself for that, because you realize this might be something that's not a dead end. Maybe I can't really go much farther from this. So you kind of another approach to it. You know what I mean? You didn't just kind of accept it as it was. You found another way to advance yourself, and you did even more when you decided to write your book, which, as you explained to me, you told me it was because you wanted to set the agenda. And you said you actually admitted to me it was almost like an ego thing, which is funny to say because usually we call it in fancy terms like adding authority to your words, right? But at the end of the day, that's what it says. That how does that connect?
Yeah, it's anyone who says writing a book's not about ego, I just wouldn't trust at all. I mean,
we like to fluff it up a bit, but it is true in the realm of you give authority to your name, you put your name on it, on the shelf. That really does, create an impact. But go back to what you were saying, because
something I'd never considered is that when you've written a book, you'd really put yourself out there, and you're open for criticism in a way that's you're holding yourself up as an expert, and people are always very keen to take a shot at you and people are still pointing out mistakes in my first book, which was in 2008. And I'm like, well, for a start, I've changed my mind about a lot of things. And secondly, there's more in it that isn't a mistake than is a mistake. It's like you can't really expect anything that's full of opinions to be completely error-free. So you have to have a fairly thick skin as well as a fairly big ego to do it. But in terms of setting the agenda, I thought there was just so much nonsense written in the trading space. There still is. I think along with diet books, it's probably the field that has the most absolute garbage published about it. And you got to remember, the stuff that's published is probably the best of it. I mean, if you go into Reddit or the blogosphere, it's just so full of complete nonsense. And I really just wanted to sort of say, look, this isn't magic. It doesn't involve looking at patterns on charts and trying to sort of figure out some really esoteric thing. There's actually a way you can do this. There's a process. Just like learning to be a carpenter or whatever, you can learn how to do this. A lot of people have this idea that there are secrets, and there are secrets in trading like there are secrets in any other business, right? It's like, I'm sure anyone, like you're, a brewer or whatever, I'm sure there are things you do that other people don't. But most of the really big money in the world is made by people who do very well-known things. It's amateurs who worry about giving away secrets. The pros really know that there aren't any secrets, and it's mainly about implementation.
So let's move on to another question here. How are you actively using your book to grow your business?
It's sort of, I know this is a podcast directed at authors, so I'm probably a terrible example here in that I don't really care about that side of things that much. To me, it's almost like a separate hobby type thing. I really just enjoy thinking about this, writing about it, talking about it. So I'm sure it has opened sort of some doors on the business side, but the people who read this book typically aren't the people that I would really need significant help from now. It's mainly read by people at the coalface, actual working traders, as opposed to the people who run the firms, which is what I would really like to have them into, I think.
Now, I wonder, have you ever thought about perhaps writing one that would cater to what they're looking for as well? It is all about the audience, so I wonder if perhaps you were to change direction a little bit and maybe, gear it towards those audiences that you are working with, your clientele currently. Have you ever thought about that?
Together with someone else, we did an online course, basically putting all this stuff out there. But it was largely, again, I'm terrible at business, right? This was not in any way really to make money. It was mainly done because I got sick of answering the same questions all the time on LinkedIn. So I was like, look, why don't we just write all this stuff down, give like a 5-hour course and call that it. But it grew into like 30 hours. And we've still got a Discord group based on that, and quite a nice little community. But again, it was sort of more, I wanted to help this group of people and I didn't want to have to repeat myself 50 times.
Right.
And we did charge for it, but again, mainly because I didn't want people to sort of mess it up. If you charge for something, people tend to treat it with a bit more respect.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. Some people, like I mentioned, the automatic thing you're thinking of is the profit and the authority behind it. But another way that you just said is another big reason. So I think that's really important too. There was questions that had to be answered. Now you wrote that book, and now it's out there for everyone to pick up if they want to find the answers themselves.
Yeah, and hopefully I've put some of these things to bed.
Yeah, and well, you did mention your Discord group a little bit there. So let's dive into that a little bit. What exactly does that entail? Are you just answering, Q&A? Are you giving little lessons? Tell us a little bit about that.
It was essentially meant to be a follow-on from the course. So, you sign up for the course, and then the whole thing was really, it was going to be interactive. So it was going on, like, I'll write a sort of a private blog. You guys can read it. When I say you guys, literally everyone was a man. So there's no generalization here. It was literally And then the Discord is basically for people to ask questions. And then it's sort of built into a little community of its own. It's now probably fairly self-sustaining. And people are always coming up with ideas. And I know everyone says this. They're like, oh, I think I learned more from this than the people who read it. And I think for the books that wasn't true, but I think in this Discord it really is now. And I am actually learning, I'm getting new ideas, which if you've been around anything for a while, the most precious commodity is new ideas. Talking to outsiders, this is one of the retail book that I just did. Talking to outsiders is where you get the most new ideas, because all the professionals have done the same finance courses at university. They've read the same books. I'm not going to find anything new from someone who's come to it from reading my books.
Right, I understand. So that's a great way, through Discord, then you're saying you're able to expand your knowledge base just by talking to other professionals, whereas, the people who read your books, not necessarily, because they're the ones don't quite understand it yet. That's sort of what you're getting with that.
Probably. I just kind of think that Discord is the sort of more modern version of just sort of having a, in real life meetup somewhere. And, there's a group, maybe there's 400 or 500 members, but there's a group of 10 or 15 people who are very active, and, we just chat on there, I guess.
Yeah, honestly, it's amazing how communication has evolved in that way. Think about it this way, like long time ago, if you wanted to have a discussion like that, it would have been nearly impossible, right? Because these people are all over the world, and included, like, if you don't have a chat room, like the idea of a chat room was once a thing, I remember when I was younger, we used to have like AOL chat rooms. This is just like a much more advanced version of it, but it's crazy to think how, you're able to take your knowledge, you share it with other people, it's not only just in the book, but you're taking it and you're talking about it online and learning at the same time. I mean, that's just like a very interesting concept too, especially with something as complicated as your field is. Something the general person for me, I took a look and I was like, okay, I did a little bit of research to find out about quantitative trading, and I looked through your book a little bit, positional option trading. But I think I would definitely need that Discord group to get a good understanding of it too. It's great that you have that additional resource.
Well, I do try to write the books in a way that the equations can be completely skipped over. So you should just be able to read the paragraphs and get most of it. But some things can't be said outside of equations. An equation is a great way of summarizing a complex relationship. And something I'm very honest about is in the forwards and prefaces and introductions, I'm very honest about, look, I'm not trying to explain everything. If you don't want to do the prerequisite work for this, that's on you. I literally don't care. Don't tell me, though, that what I've told you is wrong because you haven't done the work. I don't mind bad reviews if someone says, this is wrong, there's a mistake here. What I hate is when someone says, I read this book and it's too hard. That's not a reflection on the book. That is a reflection on you.
Yeah, on you, because you didn't do the work, you didn't listen to what you're saying to do. That kind of goes to everything. It's funny, I actually am a teacher as well, in addition to doing, angel writing and editing, I do teach. So it's funny, you'll give somebody a set of instructions and tell them to do this before you do it, and then they'll still be like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So
it's like, what happens if I don't do this? And you're like, well, I literally don't care. I already know this stuff. If you don't want to learn it, that doesn't really matter to me at all.
Right, yeah. And I mean, you do a great job of taking such a complex topic and making it in a way that pretty much anybody can pick up and at least get a general knowledge of. I kind of just opened the book, I flipped to a page that was, available to me. And I might butcher this, but my understanding of it was, what I gathered from this, and you might laugh if I'm wrong, but you were telling, your audience and everybody that profit loss depends on the difference between what the market thinks vitality will be and what it actually turns out to be. And so you kind of have to understand the limitations and use it correctly. That's the gist of just one concept from your book. And
yeah, that's pretty much right. I mean,
okay.
to make
I kind of read it a couple of times. I was like, okay, that makes sense. And just it lends a hand towards what you're trying to say and how you're able to deliver it.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that, because it's a concept a lot of people don't seem to grasp. It's like, to make money, you don't just have to be right. You have to be right in a way that's different from everyone else. So you thinking that, I don't know, Amazon's a great company. So what? Everyone thinks the same as you in terms of that. What do you think about Amazon that's different from literally everyone else? Which is why it's difficult, because there's no minor leagues here. You literally have to be better than everyone else. So it is kind of tough. There's one sort of way to make money, and there's millions of ways you can get it wrong. So why it is kind of a difficult job.
Yeah, you have to do it smart. It's all about mapping out what is going to be unique in the market, right? You can't keep doing the same thing as everybody else, like you said, because everyone's doing it. You need to find a need for something that's not already there. That's why you wrote your book, for example. There wasn't already a book out there. It had to fill that need. I guess that applies to anything when it comes to making money or business in general.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like trading's some uniquely difficult job, because I think if you're really good at any job, it's difficult. Literally any job. The people who are really good at it are doing something that's difficult. It's like you might be teaching 6-year-olds, or you might be cutting hair or whatever, and the good people are, they're legitimately good, and I think all jobs are difficult at a certain level.
Yeah, for sure. And in order to be recognized, you have to be better in general terms of what you said earlier. So you can have a job that everybody else has. For example, when I work a lot, so I'm able to turn projects around. So the benefit of what I do is kind of timeliness and flexibility in what people need. So in a way, I guess it's also about doing something differently just to benefit somebody, tweaking something that's already there and helping it in a different way. Kind of what you did.
That's another sort of trading lesson I try and teach people. There's this sort of idea, and if you go into YouTube, it's going to be all over the place. If you look at the stock chart and then you find some magic pattern, and you're like, okay, this looks like a flag or whatever, so I'm going to buy it. And I'm always like, look, why don't you just step back for a second and tell me how every other business in the world makes money? You make money by providing a service that other people want to pay for. And typically, what you're doing is you're providing a service other people don't want to do. Right? So you're doing something that benefits the world and probably sucks in some way. So if you can't frame your trading idea in sort of a business sense, it's very unlikely it's going to work. It's like, so if you come to me and you say, oh, I buy stocks when everyone else is scared and there's no one else to buy them because everyone's selling. Like, okay, I get that. You're providing liquidity in a dangerous, risky time. But if you come to me and tell me that your edge is that you're really smart and you work really hard, I mean, like, that is the potential to do something, but it's not actually a plan in itself. Would you invest in someone if they came to you and said, I've got this really good startup, I'm smart and I work hard?
Credibility, right? You need reason.
Yeah, that's not a business plan.
Yeah, it goes for anything. I'm just going to keep relating it to books. That's why, I'm an expert at that. So you can't just say whatever theory or framework that you're trying to present in your business book and just be like, this is it, read it, do it, implement it. It's about like, okay, a reader's going to take that and probably just close it, put it on the shelf, unless like you have the evidence behind it, the case studies, statistics, proven facts behind it, right? At the end of the day, if anybody's going to listen to you, idea of listening, you're wasting money and spending time by listening to that person, right? Because time is money. So you need to make sure that in your books, everything you're saying has value to somebody, sort of like that ROI, and just by reading a book. And I'm sure you can relate to that, in your business too, because anybody that's coming to you for advice or anything, it's kind of the same deal. You need to help them.
It's difficult to do on my end as well. My dad was a teacher, and he said after teaching for like 50 years, he said he'd never really figured out how to do it, because you can say the same thing to someone in 5 different ways, and eventually they're like, oh, I get it. Why didn't you say that first? And he was like, I did say it first. It's just not in exactly the form you needed to hear it. Right. So that can be difficult. It's good and it's bad. It's difficult if you want to get a concept across, because you're like, I said it. Like, if I could say it better, I would have written it better the first time. On the other hand, sometimes you find people pick up something in the writing that you didn't really think was there. I've had people do that. People I've talked to afterwards, they're like, oh, when I read your book, I found out this. And I'm like, well, I didn't write. So that's on you. You took what I wrote in the book and developed it or thought about it. That's the upside of it. But it's one of the reasons it's hard to teach people things, is because it's got to be in exactly the right form for where they are and how they're prepared to. Because I don't know if my books are always really short.
Yeah, I was only able to see like the beginning part of it when I was looking through it, but I realized it was pretty short. Yeah, I guess, you're short, sweet, and to the point, right?
Yeah, like my PhD thesis was only about 70 pages. I know a lot of people will say you're meant to say something and then say it again and then say it again. And I'm like, look, I haven't got time for that. I'm going to say it the best way I can. I'm not going to say it the best way I can and then twice more in not such a good way. So you might have to read it 5 times, but I've done my bit. I can't do it any better. Then now it's up to you. Again, that's probably just completely arrogant, but whatever.
No, I wouldn't say arrogant. You can only do so much for somebody, right? You write it in the book, you explain it as much as you can, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's lost. But I guess that's kind of the craft of writing, right? Like you said before, finding a way to get your message across so that they understand it. I love that you made the teaching example before, because as I mentioned, I do also teach. So what we call that in a way is the zone of proximal development. I'm sure you've heard that before. Kind of like when you're talking to somebody, you have to meet them exactly where you are in that zone, and you scaffold them to get to the next level of understanding. If you do it too much, they're going to give up and not want to hear anything more about it. If you don't do it at all, they're never going to progress. So you got to kind of find that middle ground. So in a way, writing a book is like that. You need to find a way to take your reader and adapt what you're saying to wherever they are in their understanding and push them a step farther. And I think you really did do a good job in that. Look at me. You think I know anything about that by looking at the book to start? So yeah, I guess it just goes to show you have like a little bit of a talent for it, as much as you might not want to say so.
I think the difficulty with a book is you don't get any feedback as you're writing it. So you have to sort of write it for an imaginary person. Whereas if you're talking to a class, you can see the faces and you can see the blank stares and you can see people drifting off. With a book, you don't get any feedback like that. It's almost like you have to have an imaginary reader. But
I'm going to do one better, though. You've heard of beta readers, right?
I have.
I'm going to say send your book out to some beta readers, get their feedback, go back, revise. I'm offering a counter argument here. I see what you're saying. You don't know exactly how the audience might react to it, but there is a way around that. Go ahead and send it to people halfway through. Give them a chapter. See if they learned something. What's confusing, what's not.
Have you done that?
Beta reading? Yeah. It's actually one of the more easier jobs in this realm because, editing involves going deep into the content, right? Whereas beta reading, I'm enjoying it. I'm reading it, I'm making notes, I'm saying, like, hey man, this paragraph, it's above my head. This one makes sense, and based on that, I'm not even directly changing anything. That kind of work is just allowing you to do what you want with the feedback. It's just kind of, almost like going to an ice cream shop, right? And being like, let me try this flavor, and you kind of got to get the right combination of whatever flavor you want. I mean, that's how I see beta reading, at least. Just an example.
Maybe me asking you wasn't going the right direction for what I was saying.
Opinion, go ahead.
No, it's like, I think it's probably because of the books you're reading and who you are. When I ask people to sort of read it, I want them to tell me if the content is clear and correct. What they tend to do is say things like, oh, I think you should have had a comma here, and this sentence, I wouldn't have used this word, I would have used this word. And it's never clarity they're coming at, it's always style. It's like,
so I guess those people are doing editing. They might not quite get the idea.
I don't need people to tell me how to sort of structure a sentence. Well, maybe I do, but I don't want that. What I want you to tell me is, can you understand this now in a way you didn't before?
Right.
And it's quite funny because I ask these people with huge amounts of experience and they give me all these style points and they don't notice the egregious mistakes in some equation that they should have seen for the last 20 years. So maybe it's the people I give it to.
Maybe. Well, to all of our listeners listening right now, before we had this call, Mr. Sinclair here actually sent me an email and he said, quote, I don't like rules like that behind writing, referring directly to the Strunk and Write guidelines. You actually told me that you think writing should be more like punk rock than classical music, which is just an amazing conversation to get into with somebody who is an editor herself. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when I read something, I'm like, okay, there really shouldn't be a comma there, that sort of thing. But you do have a good point. What does it actually matter if you're getting your idea across? There's a good conversation there.
Yeah, I think there are definitely guidelines that make things more clear, and I think that's a really good thing to do. And I think keeping your sentences short and declarative is important, and keeping your paragraphs short and having a logical flow of ideas. And I'm sure when they wrote that book, when was it, in the 20s or something, right? I'm sure there was a great need for it, and I'm not criticizing them so much as the fact it's become canon. And that's where I think things have gone off the rails a little bit. I'd like to think I had a decent education, and we were never taught any of those rules. And that was either in New Zealand or in England. People weren't taught that stuff. Whereas here, it's like if you do a writing course, you learn all those rules. And I think if you do it really well, you get the New Yorker writing style, which is fantastic, right? The writers for the New Yorker are very, very good, but it's a house style. And I don't think everything has to be done like that. And like there are some things in there that I just don't think help. Like I literally never heard of the active voice before someone criticized what I've done. And I'm like, no, I think this is what I wanted to write. I'm sorry if it didn't fit what you were taught when you were 15 or whatever, but I don't see anything wrong with what I just did. And I think if we were a little looser with that stuff, maybe people wouldn't get as freaked out about writing stuff.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother topic too. So many people are like, I can't write, I don't know how to do that. But I mean, I always tell people, I'm like, just sit down and start writing. If it's incorrect, it's fine. I'm here as your editor. I can help you make it flow. I do want to make an argument. If you do make paragraphs of just one sentence, the readers you can't understand that, right? You have to have a basic level of punctuation, grammar, and all that. But I do agree. When I first got into this job, and I remember I was editing somebody's thing, and they asked me to look for active voice versus passive voice, and I was like, these kind of are saying the same exact thing. One sounds a little bit nicer. The other one also sounds nice too.
Something in a way that's a bit off. We have a one sentence paragraph. That's kind of, people will notice that. You can't have all of them like that, but sometimes to make a point, having something that really stands out on the page does help.
Yeah,
and sometimes a sentence that's a bit jarring actually helps more than one that flows perfectly.
Yes, it gives you emphasis on the point. So it really just depends, I guess, on your delivery and your audience. In your realm, you just want to get the information across. You're trying to answer a question, fill a need. You're not trying to be artsy or win an award for, best book because Grammarly said it was when you ran it through Grammarly, right?
Well, now I feel attacked. But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's like people read my stuff for content rather than, they don't expect it to be Hemingway.
There you go. That's a good example.
Although Hemingway is probably
He was complicated to read too, though. He didn't follow those instructions too well himself.
But he's very clear. And I think if you want to copy an author, if you're trying to get ideas across, he's a very good person to copy. Because there's lots of short declarative sentences. It still paints a picture. And it's also deceptively difficult, right? It's because it's almost like a Jackson Pollock, where people are like, oh, he's just throwing drips down there. But if you try and do it, it's much harder than it looks. And writing something in the style of Hemingway is a lot more difficult than you might think.
I get that for sure. I mean, in order to really do it correctly, and especially now that we have these guidelines, it's almost too hard for a lot of writers to write in a more unique way. Like my natural instincts now, being in this career for so long, is to follow that, right? It's almost like, if you're gardening and you're trying to tend to some plants, but you keep pruning at it and picking at it, right? It's not going to keep growing. Those ideas kind of get cut short. So I see where you're going with that.
I've got a sort of half-developed idea of writing a finance book in the style of the Screwtape Letters. The Screwtape Letters were written by C.S. Lewis, the Narnia writer, and he wrote it as letters between a senior devil and a young devil. The devil was explaining how he could tempt this person into committing sins and so forth and blah, blah. Because C.S. Lewis was a very religious person, which obviously my finance book would have nothing to do with that. But I think the style of it and the format is, I think it's a really magic book.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So my question, you would be writing it in the form of letters, perhaps, like two people sending letters.
Would be done, I'm thinking of, you've got a senior devil who's trying to teach the young devil how to make people lose money by making all these stupid mistakes. And I think there's something there, but it's so difficult. The format of it, it's very difficult to do. I've never quite managed to get it to work. Although now I could probably throw it into ChatGPT and say, write this in the style of C.S. Lewis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was going to make that joke when you said Hemingway, too. Write me something like Hemingway style. I do have the counter argument. As much as people keep saying that AI is growing and growing, it's not perfect. You can tell when it's not. So I see where you're going with this. I know you're saying it is a difficult thing to kind of mimic that style. May I ask, what have you tried so far? And you've dabbled your hand into it a little bit already, that idea?
Sorry, in what?
You've dabbled a little bit at the idea of making the letter. Have you drafted like a chapter or two about that yet, or?
I mean, I've got the content pretty well down. It's just I can't decide on the style. I can't decide whether to update the whole thing, because he wrote it in, I think, the 20s. I can't decide to update it and have it in email form, email from this devil to a new, but that doesn't seem to work. It's a germ of an idea rather than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that idea. I think the emails would be better, or even just I wonder if Twitter posts or something could be a funny thing to write. They're commenting on that. I feel like there's a level of it becoming silly versus you want to get the information across as well. Perhaps a multimedia type book too. Maybe some quick things could be a shorter type of message form. The longer letters could be a blog posts between each other. I mean, there's so many directions you could take with that. But
you have to read this book.
I have it open on my screen right here because I wanted to know myself. Apparently, they're called Wormwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I do like Narnia, so I'm sure it's a little bit different than the children's book, but
yeah, Narnia gets very preachy as well towards the end. I can't remember, one of the sisters is kind of written out of it, because obviously she did something horrific and we're just going to forget about her because she's a fallen woman or something. But I mean, there aren't many books I would say are absolutely canonical of their style, and I think this one really is.
Yeah, I mean, if it were me and I wanted to approach it like that, what I would first start by doing is, if I were to, help you with, in terms of editing, hypothetically, ghostwriting, editing this sort of project, we would first talk about all the content we want to get out there, right? And kind of think about, okay, this is the information. We want to express these ideas and concepts, but in a backwards way by saying, don't do it like this. clever enough that the reader knows that it's like satirical in a way, but also getting that information across. So it would be a fun little puzzle to figure out. But then, of course, the next step after that would be like, okay, how do we present each one of these? But I can see how that's really fun and creative to think about, because that's not really something that ChatGPT can come up with correctly. You know what I mean? It would be more like we'd have to sit and we talk and maybe hop on a Zoom and get to know the content really well. I don't know, that's just my thoughts. I think it really is a concept worth exploring.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's do it. I'm looking for the next project. And it's been like, I pulled up an old laptop today and I found a copy of sort of some notes I made from like 2010. So it's always
really okay. 14 years ago. Wow. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, I think that would be one of the, if I had books that I think of as like really the top 10 books of the world you have to put in a bucket somewhere, that would be up there with a few others that I can think of. It's really, really well done.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely will. I'll grab a copy from my Kindle right now. You know, like I said, I love that author, so I definitely give it a shot. Listeners, too, if you're listening right now, I think this is your sign to pick that up too. The Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And keep an eye out. Who knows? Well, maybe Sinclair here and I will start doing that together too, and be on the lookout for that on the shelves eventually. Maybe we'll see where it goes.
No, I think it's ripe to be done. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, a lot of thought work, a lot of creativity, but honestly, that's kind of what the writing process is all about. You know, you have to be creative about it. And whenever I work with clients, everybody's looking for something different, right? You have those people who are sticklers for like the commas and grammars. I've had clients who I'll edit something for them and they'll come back to me and be like, why didn't you add a comma in my sentence here? And I'm like, if you wanted a comma there, you also could have written it like that yourself to begin with, right? You know, so like a lot of times it's like, what is your vision for the book? What, you know, do you want from it? Clearly, from your standpoint, you just want the style and, you know, to get the information across. So that would be my main focus. So it's all about like adapting in that way and putting it creatively into the context that you're looking for. So yeah, I think that's it would be a really fun project to take on, just something to think about. I could always give you my information later on and we can schedule another call that's not being recorded and listened to. But hey, everybody listening right now, same deal. If you have any ideas for a book, don't let everything that we've been talking about hold you back. If you don't know, if you don't think you know about writing style, you know, proper punctuation, doesn't matter. Just get out there, start writing it. If you think you need help, there's amazing services everywhere for it. Authors on Mission has countless editors, angel writers, a whole team behind your back. So
that's the whole punk rock thing, right? It's you know, like modern art. What's the biggest cliche when someone sees a modern art painting, they go, oh, I could have done that. And then the standard comeback is, yeah, but you didn't. But I think a more important comeback is, no one said you couldn't. You know, there is literally nothing stopping you from doing this. Or pick up your guitar, go in the garage and just start banging stuff out. The Ramones didn't get classically trained. You don't need to know that stuff. You
learn by doing.
Yeah, literally just do it. I mean, if you can read, you can write. It might not be perfect, but you can get better. You can't expect to be, I don't know, Thomas Pynchon on day one.
If you don't know something, just try it, practice it. And honestly, it's really about partnership too. Like I said, if you don't know something, ask. There's nothing to be afraid of. I mean, no one's gonna laugh if you're like, hey, what do you think about this sentence, right? Like, so I said, like, beta readers are always beneficial. But I might want to circle back to that, because I don't know if you fully got out what you wanted to say about beta readers. I guess you were trying to tell me like some of them just kind of do more editing than just beta, right? I feel like we might have got off that topic a little bit before.
I think I might have finished basically.
You did, yeah, okay.
Complaint about that. I'm asking these people to help with content, and they keep giving me style tips. And it's like, for a start, no one's going to read this stuff for the style. Literally, no one is going to pick this up because they think, oh, it's so well written. If it's well written, that's a bonus, and people will like that, and that's important. That's not what I need. What I need is people to help me spot mistakes in the content. And that's work. And people don't want to do work. They want to just sort of say, oh, I would have used this word here. It's like, well, go for it. You do that if you like, but that's not what I did.
Yeah, well, no, that's okay. So I see where we were going with this, and maybe it's me who wanted to add something to it without realizing they're doing editing. That's not beta reading, right? Beta reading is where you give feedback as if you are the reader. That's the title, the beta reader, right? So, you know, you're not supposed to approach it from that editorial, very specific standpoint of words and commas, but more so like, I don't get this, or like, this is very dry, or you know, I think we should add, you know, this explanation here. We're talking too much about this topic. That's sort of just what it is. So it's all about like just making sure the content is where it should be for the audience at the end of the day. You know, speaking to whoever you're trying to get the ideas across and really focusing on that. You know, let's think about another question here. So you mentioned to me that your last book, you actually did collaborate with somebody. It wasn't on your own. You mentioned a professional gambler impacted your latest book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So he's one of the people I met, I've never met him in real life, through the books I've written. And he contacted me through Twitter, and we just sent messages back and forth. And the thing was, he would tell me ideas he had from his background, and then I would sort of help him with the theory and so forth. And because he was completely new to finance. And a lot of people were, when COVID was on, there was no sports. And so the serious sports gamblers who, like, you know, had to pay their bills by gambling on sports had to find something else to do. And a lot of them tried to make the jump over to finance. And that's sort of when he started getting involved in this stuff. And I like talking to him because he has such a completely different viewpoint of coming in. He will literally think of things that I couldn't have thought of because my mind is not shaped in that way to do it. It's such a fresh approach. And he's also got a very clear idea of, you know, odds and expectations and probabilities and all the math stuff you need. It was his idea to write this. And to be honest, I'm not happy with the writing part of it because it was difficult. You can definitely see the styles, the way his style, and he's written a couple of books before, so he can write, but our styles don't particularly mesh 100%. You know, and if you'd given me another 6 months, I think I could have changed that and made it tidier and smoother. But
was there a timeline on it then?
Sorry?
There's a timeline then, you didn't have enough time to kind of smooth it out?
We wanted to do it really quickly because we wanted the examples to be very current. So this wasn't like, my other books are kind of designed to be evergreen, whereas this was meant to be much more of a current commentary. This is what's happening now. Understood.
Before the time started changing, you had to get it out there.
Pretty much. And we were like, this is the plan. We're just going to try and bang this thing out in 3 months. And well, we did. And the content's good. It's just not, like I said, it's just not smooth.
Right. Well, you know, that's kind of sometimes you do have to reach out for even like another person. Well, first off, I do want to say there is a big benefit to like bouncing ideas off of somebody else. I wouldn't have thought, you know, gambler, right? But I can see now where you said like, you know, risks and all these other terms. It definitely gives a good spark to the book, right? Perspective that you might not have been able to see had you written it on your own. You know, as an example, I went to work with somebody, she's writing a book on adolescents and teens, which is unrelated, but she collaborated, she reached out to doctors and pediatricians and therapists, and because she got those other perspectives rather than just her mom perspective, right, she was able to make it a better book, because that's exactly what you did. That's exactly what a lot of people do. And for our listeners right now, you think you don't know something about a book, you're too scared to, that's what you reach out to. Collaborate with somebody, say, let's write a book together. Another thought out there.
You're solving one set of problems, but you're introducing another set.
Oh boy, what's the other set?
Well, it's just difficult working with someone else.
Oh, did you find having some problems agreeing on what to put in the book?
We weren't having actual disagreements like that. It was just like the things like the order, or I'm like, this isn't really what, I don't think this belongs in this book. At least put it in an appendix. Blah. And you know, if you have enough respect of someone to actually work with them, I wanted to let him write the book. I didn't want to be like, no, we're doing it this way, because that's not going to benefit anyone. I could have just written it on my own at that point. So it's sort of, to me, writing isn't really a collaborative activity like that. I don't know. I think it might be much more difficult writing a book with someone else unless you need a completely separate. Michael Lewis's books, how they often have like interleaving backstory going through them.
Give me an example.
Okay, so book The Blind Side.
Okay. Yeah, I read that one, watched the movie.
Right. So in the book, he's got a chapter on like actual football and how the theory works and how the tactics have evolved and so forth. And then the next chapter is the story of this kid from the projects who gets sort of adopted by this rich family and so forth. And it's a very standard sort of way he does things, of a personal story and then a technical backstory. All of his books are like that. And in terms of non-fiction writers, I would read anything he wrote. He's just unbelievably good. It really annoyed me. I wrote my first book and then someone said, why don't you write a book like Michael Lewis? And you're like, if I could have done that,
You could do it. That's what we were talking about before. Nothing's stopping you. Give yourself a try.
I could write it in the style. I couldn't write it that well. It's not the thing that wasn't stopping me isn't that I hadn't thought, well, wouldn't that be a good idea? The thing that was stopping me was, I literally could not do it as well as he did.
Yeah,
but anyway.
No, there's an element to that. But yeah, circling back to what you were saying about like partnership. Well, first, let me know, how does that relate to partnership? Sort of two different sides of stories within one book?
Yeah, and I think you could have had someone who knew the technical side and then someone who was more of a storyteller. Because I do think there's a difference with a story, right? The important thing is keeping someone rolling along and wanting to turn the next page I think it was Neil Gaiman, before he fell from grace somewhat, who said the thing about telling a story is you want people to be asking, and then what happens? And then what happens?
Because you engaged, yeah.
Yeah, you want them to keep going to the next page. Whereas if you're writing a technical book, you don't have to do that.
I understand that, but I mean, okay, I have so many different points I want to touch upon here. The first thing is I always say with nonfiction, a lot of the times you always want to start with the story. You start with a little story, even if it's fictional, in the beginning of a chapter, get them engaged, get them wondering what happens. You solve their problem by the end by getting into like the more technical stuff. That's just my one little side there, agreeing with you where the story is important. Oh my goodness. So I would love to go back, if it's okay with you, to what we were talking about, the collaboration though. Because you were saying it's so hard to work with somebody, like, you can't, how do you balance that out unless you're doing chapter by chapter? I think it's kind of about just finding the right system, making a plan for how we're going to make it happen. Like, okay, you're going to do this side of it, you're going to do this side of it. That works, right? That's what it's about, just finding that outline, that system that works for you. If you have an outline, you say, this is how it's going to be. This is going to be in this chapter, this chapter. You agree with that. The writing process just moves smoothly.
Yeah, that would have been a better idea.
So you guys kind of just jump into it like, all right, like let's just both write this chapter.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to take the blame for that. I don't think it was entirely my fault, but I'll be heroic and take the blame. I don't have a very good process for writing. I normally know what I want to say, so I'll have my table of contents down. But then I'll skip around between pieces all over the place, and I'll have Word files all over the place, and then eventually I'm going to cut and paste them and put them together and then move paragraphs around. And I don't have this process, or even the way I do it, right? Some people are like, they'll get up every morning at 6 o'clock, they'll write a page, like every day. But there are some days where I'll write 5 pages and then I won't do anything for a week. And often one of the things I'll do is I'll drive away for the weekend and just stay somewhere really boring in a La Quinta or something, and then just write 20 pages and just bang out as much as I can.
Method. If you have the luxury to just kind of drive away and take a little vacation, right? I would love to do that.
It helps if you don't have kids and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. I always tell people though, especially if you're busy, dictate notes while you're in traffic on your phone, right? If you're cooking, we have Siri these days, just be like mixing your soup and be like, okay, so chapter 1, this is what I want to have in it, right? A lot of my clients actually do that to me, believe it or not. They'll send me voice messages all throughout the day. And when I sit down to write it, I transcribe them, I look at their notes, and then that's how it helps me piece it together into their chapters. So, I mean, maybe that applies to you or not, or you make the time, you find a way. You don't have to get up at 6 a.m. like you said. Sometimes that works for somebody. If you're a morning person, you love it, you like to watch the sunrise. I love doing that too, but I'm also a night owl, so I get so tired. So you got to find the right time that works for you in a particular.
Yeah, and some of it's just your mood at the time. I mean, I don't believe in writer's block any more than I believe in carpenter's block, right? If you're taking this seriously, you just get up and do it. You can always polish it later. Think of it as a job. If you're working at a newspaper, you can't throw your arms up and say, oh, I can't write something today, I've got writer's block. I mean, just do it, and you can make it good later on. But I do think there are moods, and you have to work within the moods you have.
You have to fight with yourself sometimes, too. I get that.
Like, if you're in a kind of really depressed mood, then, maybe sort of, I don't know, working on the index, just some grindy task. Yep. Maybe that's what you do. And if you're in a really sort of inspired mood, maybe just write it and write as much interesting stuff as you can.
I love that tip. I just wrote a blog that's very similar to that, right? Where like, okay, you don't feel like it, do something simple. That applies to writing and also to anything at life, right?
Yeah.
Find a simple task, see how you feel afterwards. Don't push it. If you do push it, writing's probably not going to come out as good as you're hoping for it to. And you're going to get frustrated. So I get what you're saying.
You can sort of treat your moods as if they were like, I don't know, different employees in a team. No matter what the mood is, you can do something. There's always something that would correspond to it, whether it's grinding out or, making something really good or polishing it or whatever. So
yeah, no, for sure. I relate to that entirely. I mean, as a ghostwriter, as an editor, I'm also doing the YouTube videos, the blog posts, podcasts. It's like, okay, I don't really feel like writing right now. Let me research this author and read some of his books. And okay, now I'm inspired by his book and I'm excited. Now I'm in the mood for that. It's process. It's right. Finding what we have talked a lot about writing. I'm wondering, let's shift gears a little bit, just for our listeners' sake. I want to know more about you. Aside from the writing, everything we know, how you're feeling about that. You mentioned to me that you have an Italian car collection.
Well,
tell me about that.
I can see why you'd want to know more about me because I'm pretty awesome. So it sounds much more grandiose than it really is to say.
I'm like, do you have like Lamborghinis and Ferraris in your backyard right now or something?
I don't have any Lamborghinis. Let's put it. But calling it a car collection, I have 2 cars that work. I have 3 other cars that are kind of not working at all and are meant to eventually become 1 car because I need the parts from all of them to put them together. And I have an engine that eventually is going to be put into something else, but I really only bought it because it seemed cheap at the time. So now I have an engine taking up space in the garage. So yeah, I have 2 cars and then a whole bunch of parts. It's probably a better way of saying it than I have a car collection.
Okay. So your goal is to eventually refurbish the cars and just kind of have them functioning one day.
Well, 2 of them work. They are very different. So having 2 of them is kind of like, again, for your moods. One of them I'll happily drive across the country. The other one I'd be kind of happy if it made it 40 miles kind of thing. Mm. And the other one I'm hoping to put it all together at some point. I'm not going to do it. I'm trying to get someone else to do it. It's more of a long-term project. And it's been 5 years so far, so there's no
someone else than like another mechanic, or like you have somebody specific in mind, like a friend or something?
Oh, no, this guy's a mechanic.
Okay.
So he's kind of working on it between real projects.
Real work. Okay. No, I mean, I can see that, you have a passion for it. That's why you call it a collection. You're kind of like, okay, this part works. Let me grab it. Let me hold on to it. And eventually we're going to make it happen. It's kind of like, your idea for the book. You collected those ideas for the C.S. Lewis-esque book, right? And you have them ready. You want to put it together somehow. You're waiting on that mechanic to help you, just like you're waiting on an editor or ghostwriter to help you with that book. I kind of see the pattern there.
I think also part of it is, I think basically it's not like, I wouldn't say midlife crisis, right? But there's very much a tendency of you try and get what you wanted when you were a 12-year-old. So when you were a 12-year-old, you're like, oh my God, I really want that car. It's the greatest car in the world. And that's the car you want when you have money. I don't want like a new Ferrari, because to me, they're like kind of, if you can buy something, it's not cool. If you have to go and find it and then put it together and make it, then it can be cool. But if all you need's like money,
I mean, anybody can get a Lambo these days. You just go, you put a deposit down, 2 years later, they bring it to you. It's actually not that easy. It's kind of, I'm sure it's hard to earn that. But no, I get it. Yeah, there's a matter of doing it yourself and, the heart and what goes into it, the knowledge, the passion.
What I really want is for someone to look at it and go, wow, what is that? I've never seen that. That's the kind of thing you want, that kind of response. Not like, oh, look at this guy. He's got a $500,000 Ferrari. That's kind of tacky. Yeah,
I mean, there's a certain element to it. It's a status, something you might love. I can see it both ways. So I like to play.
I don't want to credit. If you legitimately love those new cars, that's fine and that's on you. But this is sort of the way I feel. And I would much rather have a 40-year-old car that only sort of sometimes worked. I mean,
yeah, the one that you said, if you can go 40 miles, right? You'd be happy. That one?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I understand that completely. It's, you have a passion for something, you want to make it happen. The writing, the books, and go out there and make it happen. Go out to your garage tonight and start dabbling at it. Why not?
It's really cold here. There's no way I'm going into the garage.
Where are you located?
Chicago.
Chicago, okay. New Jersey here. It's also very cold for me, but I think you might be even worse. So,
well, when I say it's very cold, it's just the coldest day we've had, but it's been so nice up until now. Like, it was 70 degrees at the weekend.
Yeah, no, believe me, I feel like I'm getting have actually a heated blanket on right now. You can't see it on the camera. But the other day I was in a tank top. So, but yeah, I mean, honestly, very cool discussion we've had. We kind of just going from the intricate details of your book and the technical aspects of that but then also talking about like your dreams and aspirations for other ideas that you might have. And then, here we're rounding it off with cars. I always like to end, our podcast with something a little bit fun. Sometimes I call you, I just feel like I had that idea for the car thing that, which is a perfect way to kind of give a personal touch to what you have to say. Again, going back to that other book idea, don't write it off in your brain. Don't cross it off. If you ever want to pursue it, just let me know, and I'd be more than happy. Like, we can schedule some private calls together and, go over more ideas about how we can make it happen. Make an outline. That's honestly, I think, maybe what might have been missing in the other book, because once you have that outline in place, you know how you're going to make it, and you get a good, agreement for how it's going to be shaped. It's just a matter of kind of filling in the blocks from there.
I think my biggest issue here is it's a stylistic issue. I think you'll understand more when you read the book. I mean, you should. I mean, it's only going to take you, you know how to read. It's only going to take you a night.
Yeah. How many books could you read in a night if you were given that challenge? I've read up to 3 in one night before.
I'm a fast reader. If you want me to read Lord of the Rings or something, that's going to slow me down. I think I could read 3 if I could choose the books.
Yeah.
If it was Old Man in the Sea and the Screwtape Letters and maybe one of the Narnia books, then sure. If one of the books is Lord of the Rings, then it's going to be tougher, isn't it?
Yeah, if it's lengthy and complicated, I guess that is a factor to play too. Circling back to that though, I mean, yeah, let me do this. Let me give a little, a flip through that book, get an idea for it, and I'll send you an email in a couple of days with some ideas how we can pursue it, and we'll go from there maybe.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I think it's a good project.
I like it. I mean, I always like tackling on those like unique projects. I started on doing this about 2.5 years ago. I still do teaching, but I branched off into this. And ever since, you just never know the ideas people are going to come to you with. I started off doing science novels, then it came to like self-medical books. And I'm currently working with a pediatrician, and I'm learning concepts I never would have ever imagined. So this is something fun where it's like, I'll be able to learn about this field by working with you, but also kind of fun in a way that we get to do it in an interesting way. Just kind of something to think about. It'd also be kind of fun to somehow, I don't know if it's even possible, but to weave in aspects of your cars too, like maybe making metaphors of somehow the parts. I don't know exactly how, because I don't know the realm too much, but it'd be kind of a little bit of your passion in there too. Something to think about. Yeah,
I mean, it's a ripe idea, let's put it that way. But at this point, it's just an idea. But yeah,
just an idea, something to think about, something to sleep over. And yeah, I mean, to all of our listeners out there, I'm sure you have an idea just like that. It's just something you lay down at night and you think about. You're like, okay, that would be really cool. Nothing wrong with running it by somebody, just coming up, seeing what you can come up with, and you never know where it's going to go. I mean, with that in place, Mr. Sinclair, do you have anything that you would like to share with our listeners before we close off tonight? One piece of advice to send them away?
I think it goes back to the punk rock thing, right? There's nothing stopping you. If you can write. It doesn't have to be perfect on day one. If you think you've got, I don't believe for a second everyone has a story worth telling, but if you do, there's nothing stopping you putting it down on paper. And if you want to do it, just do it. You'll regret not doing it more than you will if you do it and it's not perfect.
All you have to do is give it a try, see where it goes. If it's not for you, it's not for you. There's so many elements to it. See where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, J.K. Rowling did that, right? It worked out for her.
Yeah, there's that story of her. She had her first idea. She wrote it down on a restaurant napkin, right? And then she kept getting rejected, if I remember correctly, right? Until she finally found that right niche.
She wrote the whole thing while she was looking after a baby in a coffee shop or something.
Coffee shop, okay. Yeah,
something like that. I think there was a baby involved. I'm not sure.
I feel like it's something we could literally just search up right here. J.K. Rowling, let's see. Oh, apparently she wrote it on an airplane sick bag, but she didn't write her first novel on napkins. Interesting thing to think about. A little bit off topic, but point of the matter is that no matter where you are, no matter what you're thinking of, just get out there. If you have an idea, give it a try. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to follow the Oxford requirements or anything like that. Just see where you go, see how you can relate to your audience. You never know where it'll lead you. So, yeah, I mean, with that, everybody, thank you so much for sharing your fascinating journey from physics to trading expert to an influential author. Your story really shows how writing can shape an industry's understanding and education. Branch off, I mean, you made a whole Discord group based off of it too, just filling a need that has to be filled. And again, to our listeners, if you're thinking about writing your own book, remember, experience combined with a mission, combined with a clear outline framework for how to do it. It helps you to build a better foundation to trade knowledge, create lasting impact. So if you're interested, head on to authorsonmission.com, find out a little bit more about our processes. And also, Dr. Sinclair, how can people find you online if they're looking to find more about your work?
The Discord and the website are closed, but I'm on
LinkedIn.
Euan Sinclair. There's probably a photo of me on there. So
perfect. And you know what? We'll put the LinkedIn link along with this so that anybody listening, you can hop right in and click that link. So, okay, again, thank you for another amazing episode. Listeners, we'll see you next time. And we'll talk about another story about how you can write books that build legacy and drive transformation. And with that, have an amazing night. Thanks again.
Thank you.